Lama dong gombo jambe yoma shaza loy kongge lodrö demnye dendra nyedra namda rapsrave jinye dengön chejen zikshire nyje tugra loy bamzen kongda sibe tür mare mentum dongme jezeve rosoy kunla puje tarze yenla twejö yongden song rudra chetu nyum Leje jagdun dronze jene mare mensre dungren yuk jinye chönze raje nam dene tayin saju tarsun yönden lüzu ze tu yuku chuntra chudon chunyi jente dalu mens jambe yong la du zedin cheje chenra vizreje Dalu demu membarasrane Kantan tenju jonglo tokwa ye Lodrö pape nongwa saldo Solo namda tsurim serje saye den Tenzen pamer lingge benze Sherab nye den nongwe chukun saray Tumchon drove lama shage yuru Rekam saben menru dambe su remni lomje loburu chama jong deshin kuje ndebu tenzebe yongzen lama jubar jela de serab gandu sije tanye le tamge sam shage yongzong shin Jean-Jim Yimbe Lamkin Karma Ba Mise Debe Chige Tsuge Du Rogam Jesse Zongwe Bashin Le Zongre Chebe Chue Yin Gan Tam Nyan Nave Yap Yalwe Yap Du Churjan Jesse Sur Nave Singe Teme Lodrö Thaye Lasso Tene Ta Chödrak Karis Chogyo Na Yang Mwendo Samba Shongjib Chodo Semjero Nang Shude Tere.
So, Khenpo asks all of you to begin by generating the body-mind, and with that as your basis, listen attentively to the teachings that will be explained.
Tene Ta Yina Yang Datung Shongjib Semsinge De Kararis Jene Kazan Jigjawa Nando Ngati Tanta Toma Tipa Shusha.
So, in terms of questions coming in, one question concerns the body-mind. And so, Khenpo Rinpoche will say a few words about the body-mind to begin with.
Ta Chetan Pena Longban De Suginang La Tene mind training Sayatan Tene Jase Lanin Sodom Matan Tatinde Tomna Chindo Kanka Chongjib Semten Derde.
Now,
Chedik Lamtsu.
Lamas in various Buddhist centers very often teach a topic known as mind training, as well as a topic called the 37 practices of a bodhisattva, and so on. All of these are about the body-mind. So anyone who would like to find out more about the body-mind is recommended to, if there are no courses available, to read these texts. There are translations of them in both French and English, as well as German and perhaps some other languages.
Cheper to Pana Shongjib Sem Korde Jachem Song Devate Chik Chönju Shunken Dede.
And then there is yet another text. Its Sanskrit name is the Bodhicharya Avatara, translated as follows a guide for engaging in the path of a bodhisattva or the actions of a bodhisattva.
Tene te indu bana Jamgön de France ke to re ke tradamenda ge jurjaja yore.
Now the person who has asked the question is a French citizen, and therefore Khenpo Rinpoche wants to point out that this text, the Bodhicharya Avatara, there is a French translation of it, which you could purchase and read.
Bana France dodon le yunkin imeke translation group, Pamakara translation group, Zawa Juriore and Delba Juriore, Kanga Jurshayo.
Now, there is a translation group by the name Padmakara attached to the Nyingma Center, the Nyingma Buddhist Center, Tibetan Buddhist Center in the Dordogne, a neighbor to Dakpo Kagylin. That translation group has translated both the root text and a commentary to it into French.
Tene ngayang samakos yina jigren la jonju shede.
And Khenpo Rinpoche himself, throughout 4 summer courses in the past, taught this text, the Bodhicharya Avatara. So Khenpo Rinpoche says you could request the Dakpo Kagylin administration to provide you with the transcripts from those 4 courses.
Nye shesage jonju zawan jingbachi jangwa dreba jonju le dreba yagan chunju wa tang pheg lama so chamsha wa dreba ya tang ngap chukju yojire te pema kara so jurbe gin dreba tegaran gen nge she.
And Khenpo Rinpoche's explanations he based in the commentary to the Bodhicharya Avatara, which the Padmakara translation group has translated. So you can actually combine the transcripts with reading the translation, because it's the same text that's used. Now, in general, in terms of Tibetan Buddhism, there are about 160 different commentaries to the Bodhicharya Avatara in the Tibetan language. So you're recommended to study these texts and in this way acquire knowledge of the Bodhi mind, and in the future, if you have further questions regarding the Bodhi mind, you're welcome to communicate these.
Chirtane ta lomba de bale nangbe chuju sarwa songchang perna tu se de ta ji lobdan ra che debe sodaji tene 되게 라는데 따도 간데 쳐고 민고 추구면도 tu sam gamba 생겼는데 단 지게 주차돼요. 잘 봤잖아요.
Now there is the frequent failure of properly understanding the connection or connections between studies of the Buddhist scriptures, contemplating their meaning, and meditation. Very often in this part of the world, members of Buddhist centers take the view, the wrong view, that Buddhist studies is simply an intellectual exercise that isn't or that doesn't rather have the same impact and value as meditation, and therefore some individuals who give Buddhist lectures mistakenly inform the members of their audience that Buddhist studies is not something one should strive to engage in a lot, simply because the people who give this advice have failed to acquire a proper understanding of so-called Buddhist practice. Buddhist practice with the aim of attaining enlightenment has three ingredients, as it were. One is to listen to expositions of the Buddhist scriptures in terms of a qualified spiritual guide explaining the meaning of the scriptures at hand. And with the knowledge of those contents, the Buddhist practitioner becomes able to contemplate a more profound perspective of those topics set forth in those scriptures. In consequence of that contemplation, he acquires a definitive knowledge of those topics, which makes him able to meditate on those topics, or in the context of those topics, whether it's emptiness or mind training in general, whatever the topic. So, in order to be able to meditate on something, the person prior to that practice needs to begin with acquire knowledge of the topic. Then he needs to deepen his understanding of the topic by way of contemplation, contemplative meditation. One could even perhaps call that ingredient of Buddhist practice, the second of the three. And then, and only then, will the practitioner be able to meditate on the topic in question, on the basis of his knowledge of it, his now definitive knowledge of it. So the three studies, contemplation and meditation are not three separate practices. They are the three ingredients of Buddhist practice, the practice of the path to enlightenment.
That's all. The
definition is good.
Can't definition.
Chödrak.
Tapena Shanju Simpson get the Chidan, Yachimbushida read, show Duna, Junjugan Carson Arsana, Shanju Munbe Semtan, Jukbe Semni Summer.
Now, in the Bodhicattva, to go back to the Bodhi mind, there is a definition of the Bodhi mind at the beginning of the text, Shloka 15, which says, in brief, the awakening mind, or the Bodhi mind, however one wants to phrase it, should be understood to be of two types. That mind that aspires to awaken, so the aspirational perspective, and the mind that ventures to do so, meaning putting the aspiration into practice. So, in terms of a beginner practitioner, the beginner practitioner starts out with the aspirational perspective. Rangla Madrella.
Yeah. Thoma may be doing as of Kapkal Park, Kapkal March and his own devotee. Chesa Namkatanyam Besemjin Tadak Jula, Dungal, some Jimishaba Mangu devotee. Dungal the Kanga self Gogu Sever Shepala Rani Thoma Nudange so Gogundu.
Narangi.
Setum Kinch, Nudange.
Nuden.
In the Sanji compound, top good and Sanji compound that 60 Dundumba.
So the aspirational perspective is explained in brief as follows. The practitioner here takes all sentient beings in number as vast as the sky as his focus, realizing that each and every sentient being has in one lifetime or another been a parent, knowing that we have all taken innumerable rebirths in innumerable worldly existences, by way of which it is the case that we have a connection with each and every sentient being. And all sentient beings in various worldly existences do go through a great deal of suffering. And giving thought to that each and every one of them has been a parent, one arrives at the conclusion that they deserve one's compassion and aid in return. And in order to be truly able to benefit all those sentient beings, one has to become capable in that regard. And capable in that regard means that one has attained enlightenment oneself. Then and only then would one be capable of guiding others. And keeping this in mind, one focuses upon efforts to realize this goal, efforts that make it possible for one to realize this goal, and not for one's own benefit, but for the welfare of all those sentient beings who one has realized deserve one's compassion and aid.
Lasso, something you besem singete that Tandege member simply drop a chair to Sanjay Duje Sanjay Duje Parsin Jula Labnan.
So then there is the perspective of achieving this. So one goes beyond the aspirational perspective and then engages in the actions by which this goal can be realized.
And
the primary causes for realizing enlightenment, here you find 10 actions known as the 10 paramitas, the 10 actions which transcend the ways of the world. Yeah, some of you may only have heard of 6 paramitas and wonder what are the remaining 3 then that you haven't yet heard of.
The
remaining 4, sorry. The remaining 4 are branches associated with the paramita of wisdom. Wisdom gone to the other shore.
That in the Tabuka transcription, you did number Javan basic nanda, then she would
So Khenpo Rinpoche has explained about the paramitas extensively during various courses in Dakpo Kadiling. So please again contact the appropriate person in the administration in order to obtain the transcripts that set forth the paramitas.
Tahuka Jun law, Yip Shangan and Talo, don't you turn down part the share there, but you order it, then I see that.
Khenpo Rinpoche was 45 years old when 45 years old when he started to give courses at Dakpo Kadiling, and he has since then, till now, at the age of 71, giving courses there regularly.
Some could also in that gingo chas.
He's become an old man while giving, for example, the yearly summer course.
So
now we will continue with the text. So we've come to the 4th of the 5 main divisions of the section which sets forth Vipassana. Ming? And it's titled The Way to Meditate.
And
as has been explained earlier, in terms of meditating, there are 2 perspectives. In terms of the objects of meditation, it is the essencelessness of all outer objects and the essencelessness of the mind itself that are at hand.
That into Dame Nije, Tantala, Sherapki, Sosotopi, Sherapki, Japayang, Tapach Tone. Nepa top go.
Tanda Savanangla Pebdegiore.
Devan Sona taken the Savan 7.
So, in terms of the way to meditate, Dameni Gidon Karasonso. Chödrak.
Sherabki, Devan on a desung the door.
Dame ni lamikpa.
Yeah. Dame ni Maniepa Yena Gam Kandechena and Faton Chalmades, Nepa ni
Maniepa
Dame ni Tantel La Nepa things super Mania Chick injury, some gum dena. So
the way to meditate is to, on the basis of higher knowledge, which knows the 2 perspectives of essencelessness or selflessness, higher knowledge which knows these perspectives in a definitive manner focuses upon these two perspectives. Now, if there isn't a definitive knowledge of these two perspectives, what would happen then in terms of a practitioner trying to meditate on these two perspectives of essencelessness or selflessness? The practitioner in question would try to figure out what the objects of meditation may be. So it would be a process of imagination, and by way of a process of imagination, it's not possible to make progress. The meditation has to be based in higher knowledge, because it knows in a definitive manner what the two perspectives of essencelessness are.
Perna gamje thante kar gamgyen thandate yurte.
So the object of meditation has to be known in a definitive manner, which means it's known by way of so-called higher knowledge.
Gamje thante nang la rangin me pala ngepa ting chuwachin lebgo yot. Non so
So if we take the first perspective of the two, it's a matter of outer objects of knowledge. So in order to, in a definitive manner, know their essencelessness, there has to be knowledge in a definitive manner of the fact that all outer objects of knowledge that manifest, that one knows or perceives, are empty of a real reality. Without knowing this in a definitive manner, there is no way that the meditator can focus upon, in a one-pointed manner, the essencelessness of the object at hand.
Yeah. Tan gamking lo korang, nge gamking lo korang, ngo tongba, nambang gangme sharwas, ta tende chige kowaji.
Namba kame dadi usava ko.
Yeah.
So then you have the second perspective, which is about the essencelessness of the mind. And here there has to be the same type of knowledge of what the essencelessness of the mind amounts to, namely that there is its empty nature known by illuminating or enlightening knowledge which never ceases, knowledge which is ever present within as mind's true nature.
Tillatene tan desungudwa yul thamche nongtong songjus.
So all objects of knowledge are the union of appearance and emptiness. And here the second question sent in will be answered. Another participant from Dakpo Kajeling asked about outer objects of knowledge in terms of their nature, and apparently there is a misunderstanding here, because the person who asked the question seems to have ended up with the impression that the nature of outer objects of knowledge is synonymous with the true nature of the mind, namely the union of emptiness and enlightening knowledge, which, as was said, is a misunderstanding. Outer objects of knowledge, in terms of what they essentially are, make for the union of appearance and emptiness.
That is a mistake in a young Goachiki Chanchana, Yur Sangmayan Sarton, Shepa Sangmayan Sarton Sonju, Sena Mandiga the Kayom.
The word misunderstanding here should not be misunderstood, because you could actually attribute the same type of nature to outer objects of knowledge. The true nature of mind can also be attributed to so-called outer objects.
Yeah, but Gumbashita.
Because
Shiro Yul Je Rajin Tinderis Nanga Zuk Sasan Yegmat.
no, and
That's Shiro
the Sem Gishigiore, Sugiore.
Nazu Zuk San Yegmitova.
Mindu.
Shiro Gnumachindova. Then Sem Pashak Top Chadwarwa.
You see, when one speaks of appearance and emptiness, one has to understand the following as well. When one looks into what outer objects of knowledge in fact are, one does so on the basis of seeking out what these outer objects are fundamentally or essentially. And the definition in that context is that outer objects of knowledge are in the end the union of appearance and emptiness, meaning the objects that appear, these manifestations, are empty of a real reality. Now, what is the origin, as it were, not as an actual origin, but one could ask the question, what is it that causes appearances to manifest as outer appearances? Well, it's the workings of the so-called predispositions stored in the mind stream that trigger the manifesting of those appearances. So from that perspective, the appearances are of the same nature as the mind. So misunderstanding, when that word was used earlier, is just misunderstanding in terms of the definitions that were used. Meaning-wise, one could actually state, and it wouldn't be a mistake, that outer appearances manifesting manifest because of the workings of the predispositions in the mind, stored in the mind stream of the beholder of them. So from that perspective, one could say they, in the end, also have the same nature as the mind.
But Junsin Tinder then Shakting Chilim Tuna Sungudoa. No one means Chukus.
So it's from that perspective that in the teachings of Mahamudra it is stated that the manifestations of outer appearances are nothing but the light that radiates from the Dharmakaya.
Gamje yul nong tong
One
song
could
ju.
say that these manifestations are the light rays of the Dharmakaya.
Gamje lo te nong tong song ju. Gamje yul te nong tong song ju. Gamken lo te sar tong song ju yimba la. Ta chebe nge pa chin rong gore song te.
However, for the sake of defining the two differently, as it were, there are the definitions outer of as follows, namely that outer objects are the union of appearances and emptiness, and the mind which knows them, or the knowledge which knows them, is the union of emptiness and its enlightening knowledge.
Ta tende ge tawe kwa ye yue na yang tawe kwa ti tendo nyambar ma ya na yang ge pa yo ma de song.
So a person who has acquired this view on the basis of instructions given to him, in order to benefit from the view, this viewpoint as to the nature of reality, the practitioner needs to familiarize himself with these two perspectives of essencelessness by way of resting in a meditative state which in an unfluctuating manner focuses upon these two perspectives of selflessness or essencelessness. And that state is to be a state free from mental fabrications. In fact, if one has a definitive knowledge of these two perspectives, it would be clear to the practitioner that to rest in a state which focuses upon both or either of them, while in that state there is no need for mental processes of elaboration or fabrication. Because it's a matter of resting evenly upon essencelessness itself. So what is a state based in mental fabrications? It's a state where questions surface, such as what is the nature of this, what is the nature of that, and so on and so forth. So, what does it mean to rest evenly in a state free from those mental fabrications? Well, it's about an even state which doesn't fluctuate, where there are no changes or disturbances, no ups and downs, as it were, in terms of the mindset. This is an even mindset which rests just in its knowledge of essencelessness without any type of fluctuation. And it's discouraged to once a practitioner is able to rest evenly, the practitioner is discouraged or advised to not go back to an analytic type of meditation, but to simply remain in that even state. Because if one goes back to analysis, then the mind can no longer rest in that even state. There will be ups and downs, there will be fluctuations.
Jogam the Sekido, Jog Devayana, Young Jepatan Tangim Midroy Chayugurella, Tetu, Sarcha the Shorungure song.
Now, it may happen in terms of a practitioner who's achieved a level of capacity as to resting in that even state described in brief. It may be that the practitioner, in consequence of resting in this state, loses interest altogether as to analytical meditation, sort of sinks into a state where which would even involve dislike for analytical meditation. If that occurs, this is an indication of indication of that the meditator at this point has lost a measure of his capacity to rest in mind's enlightening or illuminating perspective.
That in the Chavayina, then Kansam, some redo the shape of such as an medu, then one net,
which has the consequence that the mind loses to a greater and greater extent the capacity it had previously to maintain that perspective of knowledge, so-called illuminating or enlightening knowledge, which knows the empty nature of the mind.
That in the Chashorwayina, then she line got the Yonda Maimpa, Bingbo wasn't get the song.
Tingpo.
Tingpo, not Tommy, Rausch.
So this has as a consequence, if it's not remedied, that the practitioner in the end sort of sinks into a blank state, as if his mind has sunk into a black hole of sorts, where nothing happens, nothing at all.
And
that means that the previous progress made in both shamatha meditation and vipassana meditation is lost.
Then lo mambu tendechi gamne gamin some tendechi gerana ranane zume comes chevi jore dunane dundol chevi jore.
So this may happen, and some practitioners who mistakenly think of this blank state as having achieved the goal will simply remain in that meditative state for years on end. What would this result in? Well, that practitioner, if it's a practitioner of high merit in terms of virtuous actions of the past, he may take rebirth
Yeah.
In the realm of no form, one of the godlike existences within a world system, where he simply continues to rest in the same meditative state for extended periods of time. If he's a practitioner who doesn't have, who isn't endowed with a great deal of merit as to virtue in the past, then he risks taking rebirth as an animal.
So
it's very important for someone who focuses primarily on meditation practice to be aware of this pitfall and its consequences, so that when it happens, it can be remedied. A beginner needs to do both analytic meditation and so-called resting meditation. Most schools of thought or the majority of schools of thought in Mahayana Buddhism state that once, on the basis of analytic meditation, a mindset free from mental fabrications has been achieved, then the practitioner should focus one-pointedly upon the nature of that state, which brings us to the second perspective explained in brief, in terms of focusing on the two perspectives of essencelessness or selflessness. It is discouraged to go back and forth between these two states in the case of a practitioner who has achieved the capacity to rest in a state free from mental fabrications. This is not advised. Now, in terms of a practitioner, Chödrak lane tukken sungiore, shida nemi tukken sungiore.
Yeah, that Chödrak le tukken na kechamere, nemi tukki.
A beginner practitioner will not immediately be able to rest in a state free from all mental fabrications. There will be various experiences arising in the context of his efforts as to the meditation methods used. And these experiences are also to be used as an object of analysis in the context of analytic meditation, in order to counteract the possibility that the practitioner ends up with the impression that he has had a very high level experience and draw the mistaken conclusion that he has now attained some sort of realization, as it were. So experiences and manifestations because of experiences that may happen are to be analyzed as to their essencelessness.
pen Jamgön de song, Berg Chöju, Nima, Aju, Sacha, Dele Yembe Chöju, Pamochege, Chödrak number Chadu Chapamaton said the song do chapter.
Nima Kagyu Satya. So in terms of the four schools of Buddhism in Tibet, the three, the Nyingma school, the Kagyu school, and the Sakya school, all give the advice to practitioners who have achieved the capacity to rest in a state free from mental fabrications, to not continue or to not disturb that state by way of going back to analytic meditation. Whereas the Gelug school says the opposite, or give the opposite instruction, namely that the practitioner, while resting in an even state, should, on and off, incorporate analytic meditation. Because there is the risk that a beginner practitioner who has just achieved this capacity to rest in a state free from mental fabrications, that this newfound capacity may deteriorate unless one also from time to time incorporates analytic meditation, simply because it's a newfound capacity. So here one finds quite a difference in terms of those instructions as to Nyingma, Kagyu and Sakya versus Gelug school of Tibetan Buddhism. And there is a lot of discussion today as well regarding this, between these different traditions. Because one of the reasons for there being a lot of discussions is that it's very easy to start a discussion in the public eye by way of digital devices. You don't need to call in a specific group of people and then arrange for their housing and whatnot while debating a topic with them. You can just go out there and voice your opinion on the net, and there will be one or many responses, and thus there is today a lot of discussion regarding this topic and other topics. And today there are quite a few scholars and accomplished practitioners in the Gelug school who have arrived at the conclusion that perhaps the meditative approach of the three other schools is to be preferred. And there are those who refer to the so-called ordinary mind set forth by one of the founding fathers of the Kagyu school, Gampopa, as something very deep and profound.
Bena Latung Gambekala, Tene, Jepatangure, Sonia de Zao, Kavatu de Yorsena. Shine Gambekala,
Kare, Shine Gompekala.
Gala, Tene, Yong Mochi Yungusare. Dingenzing Zuni, second one. Tela, Yong do.
Lasso.
Gum do. That Shinegi. Yichen Latung Gum Yong do. Shineg Topji. Latung Telayang. Tachi Dingenzing Zuni and the Shargiore.
Latung Gitob Layang.
Latung la, Shineg Topji Latung la, the Reg Zuni Yungu so.
Now it appears that when a practitioner, according to Jamgön Kongtrül Lodrö Thaye, trains in Vipassana meditation, there could, in some instances, be reason for the practitioner to resort to analytic meditation, though in general that's not the case, though in specific instances it is reasonable to do so. Why? If you remember, it has been explained quite a few times that shamatha meditation is the basis for Vipassana meditation. So the proper Vipassana meditator has earlier achieved success in terms of shamatha meditation and is therefore now able to engage in Vipassana meditation. Now, previously, when training in shamatha meditation, it would have been the case, because in general this is the case, that the practitioner in his mind various images may surface due to the one-pointed state of mind cultivated. The workings of the samadhi at hand gives rise to images surfacing in the mind. So these images are categorized as experiences. And when the Vipassana meditator, who has a proper basis as to shamatha, engages in Vipassana meditation, where he conjoins shamatha meditation and Vipassana meditation in terms of the workings of the samadhi, how the samadhi is executed, there, due to the workings of shamatha, the samadhi, which is about resting in a calm state, these images may again surface while the practitioner having gone on to Vipassana training. And if this happens, then resorting to analytic meditation is encouraged in order for the practitioner to properly resolve this situation, which is a situation of some fluctuation because of images surfacing.
Pendantic ko khapon jindu ngarang ko se ji shu sha na tin.
Di shida di kawa sung re.
Tante ko kapu do tante gene pasam.
Sungnian de ngema in sarvatanda. Tenang la minduga.
Do.
Kana de. Laktong komna yang shine tog gi shalve sungnian. Det är tandan egen minushi. Okay, tenne.
Tante chetan desong de ke doa. Shine top ji sharbe zuni song ke doa.
So the text says or speaks about images surfacing in the mind due to the power of the trainee's capacity to rest in a calm state.
Ta shine gam tap minra hol tenne ta shine che gam che chi tu gam tene namto balap ten ma shinro de ta ti gam king ngo la zuni da ma sonna ta thuma deve zuni sharmo se do a
Deve sungen se du kan det inte kogo gero.
de san bitosam se gyarwa
Re yene sungen se
zuni se na dewa ngone marwa deve
ngovoni me pare se.
ya ngoni me pare te chik deve namba shardu sarwa
Ore den så dämpar känner.
ya
So images here is not to the word image here is not to be understood too literally, meaning an image which is made up of shape, color, and the like. It's about an experience, and there is the mentioning of 3 types that may occur in consequence of a high-level capacity for resting in a calm state. So the first of the 3 is a sense of well-being. The second of the 3 is a sense of illumination. And the third of the 3 is a sense of non-conceptuality. So what happens to the meditator who now has achieved a high-level capacity for resting in a calm state is that he comes to experience a sense of well-being, a sense of illumination, a sense of non-conceptuality. The problem, though, is that since he does not yet have a definitive knowledge of their essencelessness, he takes them to be real. So the word image is used in order to illustrate the reaction of the meditator, the mistaken reaction of the meditator as to these 3 experiences. His experience of them involves a sense of him seeing them as real, solid. And because of his high capacity for resting in a calm state, once he's conjoined the shamatha meditation with vipassana meditation, due to the power of his capacity to rest in a calm state, these images or experiences may arise again. And if he reacts to them as having a real reality, then Jamgön Kongtrül explains, it's a reason for him to apply analytic meditation in order to come to see their essencelessness, which he at this point fails to know. So in that instance, it is encouraged or advised to go back to analytic meditation, though in general, as to vipassana meditation, that should not be the case.
Penna denyam singeti shadow, pedo giana, denyam singeti shadow do, sharwate, shinegating and the top shargiorwa.
So the experience of well-being, extraordinary well-being, is produced by the practitioner's capacity to rest in a calm state. Once you're able to truly rest in a calm state, that makes for an experience of well-being. In fact, it's a good quality. However, if the practitioner sees it as real, then it becomes an obstacle to further development. That's the problem. And that in turn will contribute to the practitioner later on taking yet another rebirth in the desire realm. Now, the mindset of vipassana is one that is to be free from all types of mental fabrication, no matter how subtle. However, in the context of a beginner practitioner of vipassana, as he has not yet progressed enough on the path of vipassana meditation, he does perhaps not yet clearly see or know the essencelessness of objects and the mind which knows. Therefore, a reaction of pleasure and therefore attachment towards an experience of extraordinary well-being produced by his capacity to rest in a calm state will prevent further progress, as it were. So, instead of entertaining that sense of extraordinary well-being, the practitioner is here advised to go back to analytic meditation in order to arrive at the definitive knowledge of the empty nature of that sense of well-being. And by way of doing this, the practitioner could progressively sort of transform his worldly reaction to that experience into a definitive knowledge of the emptiness or the empty nature of that state of well-being, which then would make for a measure of knowledge of the union of emptiness and well-being.
That's all. That today chen jun sin gam nang bayina then patong to shama singe the rang jule jet to be.
So in this way the practitioner is to make progress on the path of vipassana meditation till he achieves a level of realization where he, to some extent, has actualized knowledge, definitive knowledge of essencelessness. Re modi yang cheva. De body mind ge kor. Chanju kisam ge kor ge cheva chicken. Ye ming na su rang go re tani yang ge yore shi sumna. Modang cheva na la do ba.
Ta ro kan gal training je ya re.
Tandas sar song sar ma song.
다 시에도 뭐 대도 다 이네 사이나인 로그로 다때 인데 다 단단히 잡잖아 빅서야
me kemendo nge tanda kering shepa sar song tren song de me na tene da de sanin che na de gira
대체 들라시 우진도 다 파로
na ri nge no so
만 로샤
pe chana la ro sha ba
나 당나 파 쵸초초들 랍샤 줄 잘난다.
말해라. 팅게.
올라서 단들라 좋아싱도 쵸초초데 가르래 세지. 다 쵸초초 생긴데 뺀나가랑서 내 동법바 몇 페이지 비싸대 소름 당 된소는 내대 메로와.
As to the question asked about the body mind, this person also asked about the 10 actions that are to be done on a daily basis. Now, in terms of answering this question, Rinpoche begins by saying that one has to realize which level one is at in terms of the path to enlightenment. And most of us, if not all, would at this point be on an aspirational level, which is part of or the beginning of the first of the 5 paths that make for the path to enlightenment. The so-called path of accumulation.
다 초초 동부터 가르랬으나 이게 들어와 송어들.
And the first of the 10 actions to be engaged in on a daily basis is to make time for writing down the Buddhist scriptures. So
단 대송 고야 돼. pen sanji chomden de ye judu tang di je tenzola tene parjive yo marwa.
Now, at the time of Buddha Shakyamuni, the art of printing had not yet been invented, so Buddhist practitioners would spend quite some time, one can presume, in terms of writing down the Buddhist scriptures. You would have to copy someone else's copy in order to at all get a copy. And it was a tradition by Buddhist practitioners to write down copies for the members of a specific audience as a preparation for the teaching that was to be given. The second of the 10 actions is to make offerings to representations of the body, speech and mind of a Buddha on a daily basis.
The
third is to enact generosity towards sentient beings, in particular towards the poor and animals. The fourth is to listen to expositions of the Buddha Dharma.
that transcription inanda pesha inanda te logo biya.
So in terms of a practitioner today, this would mean to listen to an exposition and then, having gotten the transcript of the lecture, one is to reread the transcript many times in order to educate oneself about what was taught. Then there is number 6, which is to memorize both the words and the meaning of what was explained.
The
7th is to work in order to acquire comprehensive knowledge of the topic taught, and once that has been achieved, to share one's knowledge with others. And number 8 is to recite the profound Buddhist sutras. And in terms of the Buddhist tantras, that would be there one would find the advice or the advice to recite the texts which set forth a yidam practice. In terms of the yidam, the practitioner has received an empowerment of or for. Number 9 is to contemplate the various deeper perspectives of the Buddha Dharma till one acquires a definitive knowledge of the contents. And number 10 is to familiarize oneself with those perspectives by way of meditation. So, if one isn't able to engage in all 10 on a daily basis, one should at least engage in a number of these 10 on a daily basis. Again, Khenpo Rinpoche has given extensive teachings regarding these 10 actions during courses at Dakpo Kagyeling, and the person in question can request the administration there for a transcript.
Lasso. Namde Danam Pamjet. Cheganache balap trubai sibe tsolendo wado war shung.